We started a series last weekend called Travel Light, and the whole idea behind this is that if it's possible, and I think that it is, each one of us could experience Christmas and a path into the new year this way in a way that's a little bit counterintuitive. You know, Christmas itself almost always brings with us the idea that almost every experience we have is going to be intensified. It'll be intensified whether it was good, and that's better, or bad, and that's worse, but it's more intense in a certain way. But if we can think about traveling light, it's actually a chance to discard some things, to set aside some things during this season so that the burdens that we carry, the weight that we carry in this season isn't significant, and we can actually focus on the things that matter. So I've been thinking about this concept in lots of ways, and I need to do a little survey of the room here just for a moment. I'm curious, show of hands, how many of you travel for Christmas a distance further than 2 hours away? How many of you travel more than 2 hours away? Okay, I'm looking for who my people are, right? Because this is what I do. You know, we have all these 6 Christmas Eve services, and then after the service, you know, we're in the van and we're on the road, and we got a 5-hour trip to where my mom and Jenny's parents live. And you know, it's these road trips that I actually love. You know, I've kind of grown accustomed to windshield time. We do this with our family. I love a driving vacation instead of a flying vacation. And we've driven to Yellowstone National Park and Texas and Florida and New Orleans and Washington, D.C. and New York City, all over. And kind of the rule when we go is that Dad's going to drive. That's the rule. Maybe because I'm a control freak. It's possible. That's one of the reasons. But it's also because we get there faster. That's the other reason, honestly, that Dad's going to drive. And I kind of have one rule then when I drive, which is, okay, I'm in the pilot seat, right? Who's going in the co-pilot seat? And what I want in the co-pilot seat on all of these road trips is a variety, right? So great to have conversations with my wife, but for part of the trip, I want my daughter up there. For part of the trip, I want one of my sons up there. And basically the rule is when you're sitting next to Dad in the co-pilot seat, you have to stay awake. You have to stay awake, no sleeping in the front seat, right? And your dad is going to want to talk to you about life. And isn't it true that actually if I try to sit down one of my kids and say, hey, it's time to talk about life, you know how well that goes, right? Not very well most of the time. But if we're just kind of windshielding it, kind of looking both forward ahead, and we can capture some of this time, we end up in some of the greatest, most meaningful conversations that there are. And I think if you're intentional about it, I always thought about this growing up. In fact, I got to tell you this. I'm going to step back for a second. I was meeting with Jen Ward, our Suncrest Kids director, who does just an amazing job. And we were talking about her vision for Suncrest Kids next year and what we're going to accomplish. And she was talking about how the real vision of Suncrest Kids is that we would help kids have meaningful conversations. We want them to have meaningful conversations in their classrooms. In fact, we're kind of thinking like, hey, instead of measuring attendance, what if we make sure that every time a child attends Suncrest Kids, they have a meaningful conversation with the teacher in the room, something that matters? And how do we help parents have meaningful conversations with their kids? And we just talk about this, that if you can capture, and we can help prompt you with drive time or with bath time or with bedtime, you can actually capture these times that could go by in our life as useless, but actually are moments, if we bring focus to them, that can really, really matter. So this idea of traveling light is that we're traveling through life. We're all on a journey, and we're trying to capture the most meaningful parts of life. I told you last week, the scriptures say, this world is not our home. We're just passing through. It says we're actually looking forward to an everlasting home in heaven. So while we're on this earth, it makes sense that we would capture the time we have, make the difference we can make, engage the rich, meaningful conversations that are available to us while we're traveling. And that it's not about setting aside extra time. It's actually about capturing the time that we have. And, last week we started with the idea of letting go of stuff. And if you were with us last week, you know that I led you on kind of your imagination, your little tour around your own home to picture whether you had one handful or two handfuls worth of stuff, and you got rid of a bunch of stuff. It was funny. Like seriously, I don't usually get people sending me pictures, but I got lots of pictures of closets this week. People just say, I cleared it out, and it felt better. And I'm like, that's the goal. We're traveling light. Literally, I did this after our Thursday service last week, and Friday took, I think, 8 full bags of clothes out of my closet and some other places in our home, took them, just felt great. I walked back to my office after the service Thursday night. And you know what I looked at? When I walked through kind of the outer office, there's a bookshelf that's full of books. And I looked at that bookshelf, and it's actually kind of my secondary books. The books I use, I keep in my office. The books I don't use, I keep in my assistant's office. And I think, why do I keep those books? And can I just be honest with you? I keep those books because I always think a guy with lots of books looks smart. Right? I'm just being honest with you. And I'm like, that's a terrible reason to keep books. And so right after the Thursday service last week, I sent an email to our staff. I said, you have one week. Any book on that shelf is yours if you want it. 1 week from today, they're going away. And they went away today. It feels so good. So I asked you to take this little tour of life because I want you to travel lighter with stuff. But these next 3 weeks are equally, if not more, important. So next week, I'm going to actually take you on a little imaginary tour of your relationships. And we're going to kind of ask ourselves, where is there bitterness in relationships that I have? And what if we got rid of the bitterness this Christmas? And on Christmas Eve, when we're together, I'm going to ask you to pay attention actually to the little tour of your life that marks your high stress elements in life, where you feel like if it's going to be, it's up to me. It's your control. You have to have it. And I'm going to remind you that the government isn't on your shoulders. The story of Christmas is that the government is on his shoulders. And we'll be able, I pray, to walk literally into Christmas Day with less stress because we let go. Well, today, I'm going to ask you to take a little tour of your calendar. I don't know how you feel about your calendar, if it feels like your closet or not. But it would be nice to take a tour of our calendars or just to think about the structure of our days and say, what would it look like to live my days with less distraction? And bring more focus to the things that matter most. Capture the time that's available to do meaningful things, especially leading up to Christmas. And in a season where I think it's actually counterintuitive to think, is it possible to slow down instead of speed up? Is it possible to focus in rather than be frazzled? If you and I could do this, it could make a real difference for us and I think for the most meaningful people in our lives this Christmas. So last week I said this, life is better with less of what doesn't matter, and it's better with more of what does. And I'm almost embarrassed to put this on the screen because I don't know a more obvious statement. And it's not even written in a creative way. It's not pithy in any way. Like no one would ever put this statement on their tombstone. No one would even make a meme of this statement. Everyone in this room agrees with this statement. Life would be better with less of what doesn't matter and more of what does matter. Almost all of us, in fact, probably all of us, myself included, look at this and say, that's true, but I don't structure my life that way. There are lots of unimportant things that get a lot of my time and attention, and they crowd out the important things that I wish had my time and attention. In fact, you can almost look at this phrase and think about it this way. We would like to occupy our time with more of what matters. Wouldn't that be beautiful? You could occupy your time with more of what matters. But what actually happens is we get preoccupied with the distractions of life. And literally, it is preoccupied. It is things that matter less get shoved into our lives before the things that matter, and it means we don't get to the things that matter. And I just wonder if Christmas 2022 could be the time where you and I say, I'm going to drive a stake in the ground today. I'm going to have a better Christmas because I'm not going to allow the preoccupations of life So there's a lot of scripture that's about this, and I can't wait actually to share some with you. Some of it will almost be meditating on these scriptures tonight to get our minds around them. But there's a story in Jesus' life that I think drives right at this. And the occasion of the story, well, let's just bring up the occasion of the story. It says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. So he's coming through town, and there's going to be a party at this home. Now, this was not a Christmas party. I mean, unless it was Jesus' birthday, then I guess it was kind of a Christmas party. You get my joke? No? Okay, anyway, moving on. But I want you to imagine for a moment that this is your big family gathering at Christmas, right? Maybe yours is big, maybe yours is small. We have multiple family gatherings for us. My family, be 15 people this year. Jenny's family, I'm going to tell you more about her father-in-law in this series than ever before, but this guy's a nut. First of all, he always asks me to pray for dinner, right? Like, just because I'm the professional, he asked me to pray. But then in front of the whole crowd that's there, when he asks me to pray, he always says, hey, Greg, will you say something? That's how he asked me to pray. Will you say something? I say, yeah. And he says, keep it short. That's my father-in-law. Okay. But he loves to have a great party. In fact, every other year is the big year where everyone comes on Christmas Day to his house. And I found out at Thanksgiving this year that we're all going to be at his house. This is the big year. And there will be 72 people at my in-laws' house for Christmas Eve. They have the house to handle. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. But picture this story, like that story, like your story, where, hey, obviously there's food, there's hospitality, people are getting ready. That's what Jesus is walking into. And Martha had said, hey, I'm going to open my home. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. Now, again, if you're at a family gathering, this probably happens to some degree to all of us. There's some people who are kind of working and some people who are kind of relating. And maybe in the most beautiful of circumstances, the people who work before dinner and don't relate get to then relate after dinner and don't work. Like, it works, but it never really works that way, does it? Does it? And it didn't work that way here. This is so interesting to me. Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And she came to Jesus and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. She's been sitting at your feet. She's been doing nothing. I don't know if you noticed this, Jesus, and let's have a little grace around this, right? If Jesus was the guest at your home, you'd be a little anxious about how things look too, wouldn't you? You'd be like, got to get the casserole out, got to get the cobbler in, got to get the, everything to match, got to get the table set just right. I want to make sure the candles lit. I don't know. You can imagine yourself kind of being stressed out about creating the right presents for him. And it's so fascinating because Martha is identifying something that probably happens in all of our families. Like, all of you have one lazy person in your family, right? Right? They're the person who doesn't bring any food. They're not washing the dishes afterwards. They brought Tupperware to scoop up the food afterwards so they could take it home. Show of hands, how many of you have that person in your family? Let's just be honest. Right? If you think you don't have the person in your family, it's possible. I'm just saying that you are the person in your family. So I got a lot of grace around this situation, but Jesus is kind of an interesting response. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things. What's he saying? I need us to zero in on this because this is real life. Martha, Martha, there's a to-do list of things to be done. They're around tasks, around things, around food. Martha, I mean, he doesn't say all this, but you can appreciate how Jesus might say, I appreciate what I think you're aiming at. The hospitality, the welcoming spirit. Like he's not scolding her for doing something wrong. You're going to see that in a minute. He's not scolding her for doing something wrong, but he is trying to help her see that the things she's doing, well, earlier they were called distractions. I want to call them preoccupations. I think, man, what if we let ourselves be occupied with the most important thing? But Martha was worried and upset. You want to talk about classic preoccupations in our lives, things that distract us from the things that really matter. You pay attention to what's worrying to you, you pay attention to what's upsetting to you, and you'll start to notice that that actually kind of consumes me. And when it consumes me, that's a distraction from what really matters. It is a preoccupation. And he says, but few things, let's go back for a second, but few things are needed. And or indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better. There's our word. I don't know if you know this, but life is better with less of things that don't matter and more of things that do. And when Jesus says, Mary has chosen what is better, what he's saying is, Mary's chosen the things that do more of what does matter and less of what doesn't matter. And I really want us to stop and think about this, especially about the way you would structure, the days of your life over the next couple of weeks leading up to the Christmas holiday, the way you would structure your celebrations together, the way you just think about life. Say, is it possible that you're going to go through Christmas and you'll actually be weighed down and burdened by worries and things you're upset about, and you're going to miss what's going on? It's Christmas. And this is so powerful if we will let it be powerful. Jesus did not say, Martha, you were doing something evil. I need you to do something good. Jesus was saying, you were doing something good, but there is something better. And it would be worth all of us scanning our lives to say, all right, of course, eradicate the bad stuff, the evil stuff. Maybe even there's so many things going on in our lives. And if we focused it to a few things, and then Jesus takes it, a few things, even indeed one thing, then you would have a life that is better. And so I really want to talk about the nature of distractions in our lives and the power that we have to overcome those distractions as we go into Christmas. So let me give you kind of three ideas here. For more of what matters this Christmas, I want us to appreciate the power of focus. Just sit with this for a moment. You have to fight to focus. Everything that goes on in our world is driving at a distraction with you. And let me take it in kind of the simplest form for a moment. And you got to know me. Many of you know me. I love technology. I'm not anti-phone. I'm not anti-social media. But I do think sometimes we have to have a real conversation about this. And I think, what bigger distraction is there in our lives than our phones? You guys know there is a setting on most all of our phones that is what's called screen time. You guys know that, right? Do you know what your screen time is? Well, instead of looking in your closet, maybe look at your screen time and say, that much time each day on my phone. You know what someone pointed me to over Thanksgiving, and it was quite convicting for me. They said, hey, Greg, on your iPhone, there's that screen time thing, but then if you go on screen time and you hit the line that says see all activity, it will tell you how many times you picked up your phone each day. Oh, you want to talk about the king of distractions. Like if I can't concentrate or focus for more than 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and apparently I can't because I was quite convicted by the number of pickups that I had on my phone each day. Do you know what the average number of pickups was in 2019 for your phone each day? 59 pickups a day. That's the average. And we wonder why we feel so distracted, why we feel so discombobulated, because there's always something there. And of course, it's not just the device itself. It's the life that we live, the social media that people engage in. The average person, it's just average, probably not you. You're probably better than average. Average person, 2 hours a day on social media. 2 hours a day. And if you're young, I don't know if you know this, but if you spend 2 hours a day on something, it will consume 7 years of your life before you're done. 7 years. And I just think, we should just pay attention to that because there are important things happening in the world. There are important people right in front of me. Some of them you gave birth to. Some of them gave birth to you. And instead of having the conversation and engaging with the person who's right in front of you, we are allowing the distractions of our life. And there is a power in focus. My friends, this is as spiritual as it gets. I'm going to show you a few scriptures, but I just want you to, if you can, kind of soak these in. This is Wisdom of Solomon, as we did last week from Ecclesiastes. This one's from Proverbs. He says, let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths of your feet and be steadfast in your ways. What's he saying? I don't know if you've thought about this, but actually in the way that God created human beings, he oriented us in such a way that what we give our eyes to, what we give our attention to, what we give our gaze to has our mind. And, this is just scientific. At any given time, you and I have the potential to be noticing an literally infinite number of things that are happening around us. Right now, most of you are focused on looking at me, and I appreciate it, right? But there are literally an infinite number of things you could be giving your attention to. And what God gave us, literally with our eyes, is the ability to focus and say, I'm going to give my attention to you. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience in a relationship with someone or even in a time with God where you thought, when I look at them and listen to them, and I pay attention to their words and I pay attention to their facial expressions and I pay attention to their tone of voice and I pay attention, that's what I do actually. I pay attention. I give focus. And it brings value to whatever is in front of me. That is the power of focus. Whatever you focus on, you are giving it value, both in your life, and if it is a person, you are giving it to their life as well. And the Wisdom of Solomon says, set your eyes straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. When your phone buzzes, leave it. It could be an email. It could be a phone call. It could be a dance party. It could be you got to take your kid to the soccer game. It could be a school event. It could be what? No. Focus. And if you trace through the scriptures, the way that the evil one works, call him the devil, call him Satan, call him a serpent, call him the deceiver, call him the evil one. The way that this true and real spiritual force works in our lives is that he does not present himself for hand-to-hand combat. He is the deceiver. He is the distractor. And if you and I could stop and think, when I've decided what's most important, the things that matter in life that I want more of in my life, and I set my gaze there, and then something takes my gaze off of that. What if that's the evil one? What if he knows what he's doing? To leave us ending up with a life where we're all focused on things we're preoccupied by, that are less important than being occupied by what's there. Let me just run through a series of scriptures. I'm going to run through them slowly because I want us to soak these up a little bit. We used this passage in the last series. Let us throw off everything that distracts and hinders us. And the sin, this is what the evil one does, the sin that so easily entangles us. You remember what we talked about sin last week? It's not necessarily the thing you do wrong, it's that our aim is off. And you will do whatever you aim at. That's the power of your gaze. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. In Colossians 3, it says this, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. When Jesus is teaching toward the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he just says this. He says, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you'll find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. And these are images that Jesus is giving us to say, there's a power in your focus. If you focus enough to ask, that's when you receive. If you seek something, you'll find that, but you got to hold your gaze. You got to zero in on what's important and not allow the distractions to get you. The door won't open if you don't knock, but if you focus and you knock, the door opens to you. You know, a few weeks ago, we had this awesome weekend where 41 people came up and got baptized over the course of our services, including both Ryan and Tiffany, who dedicated their daughter here today. And it's so interesting to me because let me just tell you how this works in my life. Of course, there's a lot going on in life. There's a lot going on at church. And I decide literally about 10 days before our Thursday service that we're going to have an invitation to come and be baptized. And the moment I decided it, I started to think, there's a list of people in my life who haven't been baptized, who I'd like to lead to be baptized. For the last 3 months, I haven't had conversations with any of them. But now, and I'll admit the selfishness of this, now I'm going to stand on a platform, invite people to be baptized. I don't know if anybody's going to be coming, and I can make it about myself where I'm embarrassed if nobody comes. I really want people to come. All of a sudden, I'm focused. I called on, many of you know this, I called on every leader at Suncrest, everyone who leads a serving team, everyone who leads a group, and I asked them to fast in advance of the weekend where people would be baptized. And I just got to tell you that when our mind goes to fasting and when I commit, instead of eating a meal, to praying for the move of God in this way, well, look what happens. You don't focus on it, it doesn't happen. You focus on it, you knock on that door, you ask people to come, you seek, and guess what happens? You find. And I don't know exactly where this has to fit in your life right now, but I am very confident that if you and I would appreciate the power of focus, life would be better this Christmas. If we could acknowledge the things not in our closet, but in our calendar that preoccupy us, rather than allowing us to have the things that matter, that's powerful. How do we do that? Well, I think for more of what matters this Christmas, it's actually replacing the less important things in your day with the most important thing. And so I do want to ask you, between now and Christmas, maybe even between now and New Year's, if you could go with me, and you're going to have to decide whether you want to commit to this, to never sit in a chair and scroll through social media. Maybe it'll be good for you to pick it up again next year. But just decide that between now and the end of the year, I just won't do it. I will not sit in a chair and scroll social media. And when I'm tempted to, because of course you'll be tempted to, it actually will be a prompt for you to say, oh, this doom scrolling is what preoccupies me, while my wife is sitting over there and my kids are working on homework over there, and even the dog is sitting over there. And someone perhaps should get my attention. I'm going to replace the things that matter less with things that matter more. Also in the Sermon on the Mount, actually coming out of the conversation about worry and preoccupation, Jesus says this. He says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you as well. So sometimes people ask me, Greg, are you telling me we should just be so focused we should never allow ourselves to be distracted? I think, that's a great question. It's actually kind of a tricky spiritual question. You'll pay attention to it. And this is the principle. It's like, well, what I'm going to do in my life is I'm going to seek first God's kingdom, right? Now, in a true spiritual form, I think we have to pay attention to this. All this really means is I'm shifting my focus from me to him, from what I want to what he wants, with the trust that that's actually better for me even than what I want. And what it means is I will actually allow myself to be interrupted and allow myself to be distracted when I'm focused on lesser things and there's an opportunity to do a greater thing. Jesus actually scolds people who don't allow themselves to be interrupted like that. Some of you know the story of the Good Samaritan, right? What's the problem? There's a guy who's beaten down on the side of the road. He needs help. And there are 3 people who come by. The first 2 are religious people who have what they feel like are important things to do. They don't stop and help. They don't allow themselves to be distracted by what God has for them right there. So sometimes the most spiritual thing that you can do is allow yourself to be jostled to say, I actually got focused on the wrong thing. Let me be distracted by the right thing. But of course, the flip of that is also true. That if I set my gaze, I mean, you and I could just have a short conversation about this. What do you set your gaze on? You set your gaze on being a great dad. You set your gaze on finding friendships that really matter. And I think you set your gaze on your marriage, which is the most important human relationship that you have. And I hope that your marriage is better a year from now than it is today. And the reason that would be is because you focused on it. You gave attention to it. And if you're focused on the most important things, then the distractions that would come and take you away from that, they just have to remain distraction. They have to remain outside of your gaze. And so, the invitation is to seek first his kingdom and his glory. And then he says, and all the important things then will be added to you as well. And I think that's why this really matters at Christmas. Because the third element here is that if you want more of what matters at Christmas, then you and I would have to open ourselves to the voice of God. What is the story of Christmas? The story of Christmas is God saying to humanity, I'd like to get your attention. I'd like to get your attention so that you can understand who I really am. In fact, I'm going to send my son into the world who is the full revelation of who I am. It will come at a great cost to me and to him, but it's worth it because I desperately need humanity to notice what I'm really like, who I really am, and to understand what really matters for this world. He's trying, in a sense, to break through all the lesser things, to break through the preoccupations that you and I have in our lives and say, I'm here, God, with us. And just to listen for that voice. Just to say, I will orient my life around that this Christmas would be powerful. It's so interesting to me that God sent his son into the world for a period of about 33 years. And then his son exited the world. And not too long after his son exited the world, the Apostle Paul wrote these words in 2 Corinthians 4. He said, so we fix our eyes. We focus, we aim, we orient ourselves. Not on what is seen, but what is unseen. Because what's seen is temporary. It's this life. But what is unseen is eternal. And if this world is not our home, and we're just traveling through, and that this trip ought to be marked by what's light and what's important and not weighed down by everything else, I think this orientation leads us into Christmas. And so can I ask you all just to do one thing leading up to Christmas? If you don't have a regular habit of reading the scriptures, would you fix your eyes on that to start your day, each day, between now and Christmas? You know, when you start your day with the right things and the right focus, you probably won't have to get rid of evil things. I don't anticipate you're doing evil things when you get up in the morning. You probably will have to make a trade of things that are less important for something that's more important. And all I want to ask you to read is any one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, or Luke, or John. Maybe you have a paper Bible. Maybe you have to dust it off. Maybe you want to set that by your bedside or wherever you start in the morning with your coffee. Maybe it's on your phone. That's fine. And you can find Matthew or Mark or Luke or John and say, hey, this Christmas, I'm going to start each day open to the voice of God. The story of Christmas is, of course, usually focused on the birth of Jesus. And you'll read that if you read Matthew or Luke. If you read the Gospel of John, you won't read the literal birth of Jesus, but you'll read the reason for the birth of Jesus. And then, leading up to Christmas, you'll just read this image of Jesus. And I think it's a chance to fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. And to take the distractions and preoccupations and worries and stresses of this life and say, we're focused on all kinds of things. Jesus would say, what if we're focused on a few things, indeed, one thing? And so, I don't want this to feel like a burden to you. I want you to think, I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to let go of the things that aren't important. I'm going to understand that the word distraction literally means that I can't find traction in my life. And we'll go from here, focused on Jesus between now and Christmas.
Jesus, you change everything. Lives healed, hope found here now. Jesus, you change everything. Chains fall, fear bow here now. Jesus, you change everything. Lives healed, hope found here now. Jesus, you change everything. Jesus, you change
I hope that this has been a meaningful experience for you, even online. And I want you to know that every time that we get together, both online and in person, we include a time of communion. This is a moment for people who follow Jesus to look back on life and remember with gratitude all the amazing things that God has done, our need for God right now, and to look forward with hope, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. So now is the time to get some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and his blood that was broken and poured out for each and every one of us. And during that time, we're going to reflect together. If you don't follow Jesus, that's totally okay. I'm glad that you're checking out this video. Go ahead and use this time to reflect on what you've heard so far. And with that, let's focus on the love of Jesus together. Before you turn off this video, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and share button. And I want you to know that this video, this isn't the church. You are. So this week, I hope that you go and make a difference, that you go and be the church.